Till that a Texas state representative introduced a bill honoring Albert DeSalvo, widely thought to be the Boston Strangler, for his work in population control. He wanted to prove that his colleagues passed legislation without due diligence. They passed the bill unanimously. My grandfather was actually in the Texas legislature at this time. He said he and every single legislator hated Tom Jr. After that point, he found out about the stunt while driving through Waco on his way back to Austin and heard the rep on the local radio station. Damned legislator just wanted to hear his voice on the local radio, but I digress. It all turned out mighty fine. After that point, they had people to read through every line on every piece of legislation. The bill in question, according to my grandfather, was a commemorative resolution where people often listed family members and close friends to call out things like their birthday or congratulations on marriage. There was just this understanding that this is the bill where the state of Texas wishes their little niece or nephew a happy birthday and that no one had to read it. Mr. Moore decidedly taught them all a lesson that day. Part of the issue is that the Texas legislature only meets for 140 days every other year, and so stuff gets shoved through really quickly, without a whole lot of vetting. Texas is probably the most decentralized state. A lot of things that are done on a statewide basis in most states are done by local bodies in Texas. For instance, the governor is pretty weak historically, although for the last couple of decades less so, since a lot of statewide positions are elected directly instead of being appointed by the governor. There are two persons suspected being the Boston Strangler, and one of them is also suspected to be the Scranton Strangler, who is also linked to suspicious deaths in Costa Rica. None of those bills honoring this or that mean jack shit anyway, so nobody pays any attention to them. It's like all the bills that get passed unanimously to name a post office or something. Nobody gives a shit. The urban legend around the Texas legislature is that Moore was trying to make a point that lawmakers routinely vote for measures without doing their homework and have no idea what they are, but Moore said it was simply an April Fool's joke, according to the Associated Press. Yes, it passed, but nobody got mad. It was an April Fool's joke, but it made the press in a different light, he told the AP. I feel like using a serial killer demonstrates urgency. Made us talk about it? This makes me think of when politicians get tricked into trying to make dihydrogen monoxide illegal, H2O. They come off sounding like someone paid off by lobbyists. They should give the bills to teachers who then make a quiz out of it, and if they don't pass then they can't vote on it. In school our government teacher showed us a stack of paper equivalent to an average bill that goes through Congress. It was almost 1,000 pages long and I think it was a real bill, but her point was, there's no way anyone except the people who wrote it read it in its entirety. Even if someone did, it was probably an aide who just went through it once to highlight key points. It was an eye-opener for us. Then we learned about all the bullshit stuff included in bills like earmarks and riders for bills that say they do one thing but actually change a bunch of other policies as well in hopes they can get both parties to vote on it. Hypothetical example: free school lunch program, every child gets free lunch. Simple, right? Wrong. There's 10 pages of how this will be implemented and 990 pages of shit like an increase in funding for the military in X state and a total decrease in funding to student loan programs. The intention is to get a bill that both parties want to vote for, or to get something difficult passed because it would look bad for the other party to not vote for it. In the end, bills like this need to be simplified where bills are single issue items. So if the title says free school lunch, it better be mostly about free school lunch or related to funding said shit. Lawmakers would say nothing would get passed ever, but nothing's getting passed anyways. Unfortunately, this is also how many people vote. I'll just say that the TX legislature entertains resolutions almost every day, recognizing people, groups, etc. Hell, my name as a legislative intern in a college program is on one. These kinds of things, recognizing people, are passed almost 100% of the time and have no bearing on law. It is just fluff. I once sat in the gallery with a former Chief Justice, he, 90 plus YRS old, and myself, early 20s, and laughed at the chicanery going on the floor. The SN0P's article does a great job of outlining why the thing was wrong, how the thing happened, and the consequences of the thing. And then at the end it offers reasons why it might have been fated to happen to begin with. Pretty good stuff. Okay hand. I feel like there could have been a better option than a serial killer. The other part doesn't surprise me though. Edit, I know what his point was. Please stop telling me differently. LOL. Edit 2, he could have used the opportunity for good also. Instead of just making fools of everyone. Not that I'm against what he did, but if they don't already have it, maybe he could have added a clause that during Texas state shutdowns due to the inability of the state Congress to pass a budget, Congress people didn't get paid until the state was reopened. Infuriating when National Congress got paid during the last shutdown, but who is the Scranton Strangler? Even the euphemism population control is an opening day for the Toronto Blue Jays size red flag. I used to laugh years ago whenever I passed a sign in El Cerrito for DeSalvo Chiropractic. Honestly, I did some research on the Boston Strangler and I think the name should be changed to plural. The Boston Stranglers. There were two different people doing it. A. Because there were two different modes, one being violent, the other gentile and almost dignified. B. The times the crimes were committed, a couple of cases had overlapped at Todd. C. The most disturbing thing is when the stranger story was broken by the media, everyone was told not to let anyone in except police and fire department officials. That means a vacuum cleaner salesman is not getting in, and Albert didn't have the mind to impersonate an officer. So I think there were two killers who were either police officers themselves or two people working together impersonating police officers. Albert was a patsy, even the police said so. He didn't have the mind for it. He wasn't even a good salesman. He was a person who liked to get attention, negative or otherwise. He even went to the police in the past claiming he was the perpetrator for various crimes and was later found not guilty and charged with obstruction of justice. He was arrested and charged for the murders because he gave the police details the press didn't have and only the police knew. But he still didn't fit the description. The police didn't care and he was an easy out because the public were going nuts and people were demanding the police do their jobs. I still think he wasn't guilty of the stranglings, although he was a creep. Strangely, he was stabbed to death in prison almost 10 years later. He might have found out who the real killer was, or the real killers were afraid he was tired of the infamy and was going to confess that he lied. I guess we will never know. As for the DNA evidence in more recent years, that could be just as fabricated and tampered with to still make it look like it was him. Did nobody else think about the Scranton Strangler at first glance? A few years ago I put in an application to my local council. Spent months of my life on it. Made it very clear. Very easy to understand diagrams. The week before submitting I realized that even though all my info was great, no one wanted to read all that. So even though it was hard, I cut the whole thing by about half. Then I had to sit silently in the corner and listen to these 12 counselors say things that they had no experience about. From the comments it was obvious that only 2 of them had read any of it. The conditions they put on applications were totally ridiculous. It was a very hard process to go through. That meeting also showed me that they were all just business buddies. If anyone had a monetary interest in an issue, they got up and left the room before the discussion. But all that really did was say to the other counselors, "This one's mine, guys. Vote for me."